Good evening. This is Talking Devils, the United Way tactical review of the Arsenal defeat. Manchester United 0, Arsenal 1 at the weekend. I'm joined by Tony and by Mike. Good evening, Mike. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. You?
Yeah, I'm not bad considering we lost. They used to ruin weeks, but I've got so used to it that I'm numb to the pain. And
Hope
also,
more than despair, yeah?
yeah, the old clockwise start of every season. Throw the John Cleese up clockwise. It's not the despair, it's the hope. You've got to watch that classic film just for that line. The film is great itself, but just for the line's iconic. And we've already got the despair, so why not? Although also got the joy of being joined by Tony tonight. How are you doing, Tony, mate? You all right?
I'm all good, gents. How are you? Thanks for having us again. I'm still riding the crest of my own enthusiasm from Sunday, which on the supporters' bus back from Old Trafford was squashed by all the guys around me who were still raging that we lost. But I actually felt pretty good about it because I thought we were pretty good on Sunday.
Do you know what? It was nice. Not nice to lose, like I said, but it was nice. There are certain things that you get from being at the ground, and this isn't like a status thing or anything like that. Everyone supports the club in their own viable way, and people can and can't get to Old Trafford. But I think what was nice about the final whistle the other day, even though we lost, was the fact that the team got applauded off for the changing tone. Not so much attacking, because United have attacked in games even to death last season, and they did it under Ten Hag as well. It's the tone really, and the fact that for most of the game it was a point of imposition. We were imposing ourselves on Arsenal, and we'll talk about the wheres and whys for that later on, and whether or not that was a reactionary tactic from Arsenal anyway. But it was nice to see nonetheless that there was like this positive attitude, even in response. I mean, even in response to a defeat. The problem is that we still lost the game, and no matter about how positively we're about to talk about this over the next like half an hour, 40 minutes or so, we did still lose. And this is the point that everyone's been making, really, because you can have all this positivity, and we're delighted to have this positivity and like say, oh, we played well and the system looked a lot better and everything. But at the end of the day, you have a limited amount of time, and we've got a tough run of fixtures. Although Mike put in the WhatsApp chat the other day about hoping we win Grimsby and Burnley, which really shook me to my core. Mostly because of how accurate it was. Really hurt me, that one. No one likes a healthy dose of reality like that. But yeah, the point is that we do need those results, and we need those performances against those kind of teams. And he doesn't have an unlimited amount of time, so it doesn't matter how promising we're about to make everything look over the next half an hour. This isn't Paddy Crerand MUTV telling you that United lost against Manchester City in a 7-goal thriller when they lost 6-1 at Old Trafford. I don't think he actually did say that, but you get the point. We are going to try and be as sort of objective about this as we can. Get your comments and questions, and if you're watching live, and we'll try and get to them as well. So one of the final points I closed on, and we got a comment about it on the video actually afterwards. I felt a bit bad because I don't see myself as the biggest Bruno Fernandes fan the way that I put myself across. I love him, and I am. I think he's great. And he's one of the kind of players that I absolutely love watching because he does the unexpected and he tries the unpredictable stuff. And those are the players that I've always loved watching. However, when you play in a team that has high risk, low reward, as United often do, or they've got so many vulnerabilities, and your risk taking tends to emphasize the vulnerabilities of the team, then I do worry somewhat. Not so much about him being a liability, but more the non-compensation for that. Now, he does in terms of his general ability, but United lost at the weekend, and they lost the Europa League final in a similar circumstance where Bruno was messing about on the ball in an area he shouldn't be messing about in. You get the knock-on effect. Now, I'm not blaming Bruno for what happened on Sunday. What I'm saying is his root and cause. So you go like, all right, that's where it started. You can't deny that it started from him messing about and conceding a corner when United were doing everything desperately to not concede corners. That in itself is a worry, because if you've got a team who's desperately trying to show that it's not hurt in some way, like an animal goes like to protect itself, I'm saying, please don't have a corner against us because we don't know what we're doing. They score from the first one, and really, they could have threatened to score from numerous ones if we'd have done that, but we were obviously trying to protect from that situation. Bruno put us in a position where we had to defend one, and we conceded the goal. However, by and large, the point we're going to get to is the fact that he wasn't a liability throughout, and in fact, he and Casemiro, probably until Casemiro went off, really did tactically very well against Arsenal's midfield. And to that point, whilst he's going to get the criticism, Bayandía also did tactically very well throughout the game, because we had a lot of long kicks and everything like that where we were dealing, with Cunha going up for them, and even Šeško when he came on and actually did quite well with a couple of long balls. Very rare to see a number 9 striker for United actually holding the ball up from a long pass. Is quite refreshing. These basics being done. However, we got undone by a basic. Tony, obviously the key point we're going to start on is the Fernandes and Casemiro point of actually them doing quite well in a game where we didn't really expect them to, in terms of like the players that they were up against. We probably expected Casemiro would be two-legged, but he looked very trim, very lean, and very good for the period of time that he was on the pitch. And Fernandes, for all that point I'm making about him being a bit careless in certain areas, I thought he did very, very well in terms of what was asked of him. What did you make of what we saw? Because it certainly wasn't where the game was lost, even though I was sort of cautious about that beforehand.
Yeah, well, no, we still had some hairy moments in terms of breakaways and transitions, which we encounter attacks from Arsenal. But I feel like with a team like Arsenal, with the pace that they have, you're always going to have moments like that. But the big difference for me, sitting watching it on Sunday, was I never actually felt like when Casemiro was running back or we were breaking and having to recover, that we were in imminent danger of conceding a goal, which over the last number of seasons, whenever we lose the ball high up the pitch, you're thinking, oh no, they could score here. Whereas I never really felt like that on Sunday. So that in itself would be a marker that we looked a lot more solid. I think, following on from points we made last week, when you've got those 3 defenders in a central area, and Casemiro even recovering centrally, and Bruno was a lot more held back than what he normally is in positionally. I feel, and we'll talk about that with one of the slides later on, one of the images later on. I do feel we were a lot more structured and strong against the ball on Sunday. So that, for me, that's a marker that it looks a lot better. I definitely don't think we look as imminently in danger of conceding every time we lose the ball.
Yeah. Mike, the selection was a curious one. We've got any number of midfielders to pick from. There's Belieber, who's been linked with us as well. Certainly didn't let us down. And then when we made the change and Agate came on, it's strange. I don't turn this into an Agate bashing podcast, but and I'm not just talking about the missed shot and the sort of derailing of momentum that it came from, but you look at him, you're thinking the things that he does do can't be implemented effectively in that system. And the things that he can't do are cruelly exposed. So what's the point, really, in that? You can understand, if we were winning the game and you want to pack the midfield to see it out, but when you're chasing a game, and all right, this is the benefit of hindsight, you just think, I'm not just saying this because my favourite's Cobby and I wanted him to come on, but I just think, it just didn't seem right. And, but the point is not really about either of those two. It's to do with Casemiro and Fernandes, and they did quite well, probably better than what we expected of them to do. That, again, that was not where the game was won or lost.
No, I mean, the point you make is correct. So, because when Agate came on, there was a difference in the shape. Obviously, we were chasing the game, and is it because he needed fresher legs? Because Casemiro needed to come off. possibly. But what I noticed was how the Fernandes-Casemiro axis, how they played, in particular when they were marking Zubimendi and Declan Rice. And that afforded United to have Cunha and Bremo push wide, depending which side of the ball was on. They were able then to close down Arsenal's progressions. And on that basis, how often did Arsenal give it away? Plenty.
Yeah.
So the way, and you made the point without using the word, Fernandes was very, very disciplined.
Yeah.
And that's what didn't happen when Ugarte came on. Yes, we were chasing the game. Did Amorim see that Ugarte was a like-for-like substitute for Casemiro? We're playing well. We'll carry on doing that. But I agree with you. Maybe we should have brought on someone like Mainu to a bit more guile, push him a bit forward. Would we have been a little bit more open? Possibly. But I think the Fernandes-Casemiro axis, how they played, allowed Cunha and Mbeumo to play how they played it in their Premier League debut for the club.
No, yeah, for sure. To the Mainu and Ugarte comparison, I think if you look at one or the other, you're probably better off asking Mainu to do the things that Ugarte does than you are asking Ugarte to do the things that Mainu can do. If it comes down to a straight choice between the two, and I'm not turning this to an either or. United have got so many midfielders now where they can make options like that, but it's up to the manager to make it work, especially, we'll come on to the point later on about what we've got against what we haven't got and how that can work or not work for the manager moving forward. But let's talk about the stuff that's on the slides, Tony, first of all, because you wanted to talk about how, to Mike's point about the exploitation of the wide areas. So if we start with the first slide with Ahmad.
So this is probably a wee bit about, I think everybody can see the points we were making last week about playing in wide areas, overloading wide areas, getting ones and twos round the ball. The difference between Dalot and Ahmad in terms of creativity in the wide area is plain for everybody to see. When Ahmad gets on the ball, there is I could feel it on Sunday when I'm there. You're on the edge of your seat, you don't know what's going to happen. And invariably he beats his man 1v1. And I think in this slide here, what the point I was trying to show is for the next bit, for what happens now, that we've had plaudits, we lost, absolutely, but we've had plaudits and how we played. If you look at the screen, and for those of us who are maybe listening and can't see it, it's the ball. Yoro just slips the ball to Ahmad out in the wide area and he's got a 1v1. But you've got Bruno, who's the deepest, the one on the edge of the shot there, over on the same side as the ball, is Bruno. For me, for the next bit, Amorim's progression of this system, you're going to need to see players, just if you just go back one, if you go back one to the, but you're going to have to see players breaking lines, because if you look, it's a 4v3 in Arsenal's favour, right in front of the ball. One of those players needs to break a line to take one of the midfielders away to open up the space inside. Now, Ahmad does really well because he ends up inside the box, which is on the next slide. But even then, you've still got an 8v5. So you've got 6 players trying to stop whatever Ahmad does with the ball against 4 players trying to make something happen. And that's been generous. Because you maybe not count the player on the edge of the box there. So for the next bit, and I get we're playing against Arsenal, we might give the ball away, they might counter us, they might make it difficult for us on the counter, and we're praising the team for being resolute and compact and filling those areas. You need to have players crashing the box, you need to have players running beyond, you need to have players taking other teams' players out of positions to create the opportunity to hit, to create chances and score goals, which is kind of what we spoke about last week. We're trying to create an overload. We're trying to create an extra number somewhere on the pitch. And perhaps Arsenal isn't the team that you can go and flood the box and get loads of people in the box. Maybe it's Grimsby, although Wayne, you did point out over the weekend that we've got an actual pretty even Stevens record against Grimsby historically. So maybe that's not the game that we think it is. Can't believe I'm saying that. But I think I would expect against Burnley and against Fulham, that we would see Bruno maybe not be as disciplined and go and break that line. Maybe see Mbeumo not standing in the inside kind of channel, waiting for the pass, and maybe making the run to go and take a man away or running across the front post. So, yeah, that was just really the next bit. But in terms of power and pace and things like that, obviously, anybody can see how there's such a vast improvement there. I do think, though, don't want to contradict myself when this my last point on this. There may have been points for me that Cunha and Mbeumo lifted their head and there was no movement around them. So they've decided to just go for it. Just go and see if you can beat a man. And I think there might have been a bit of that. Obviously, you would need to speak to the players themselves to see if that's what their decision was. But particularly Cunha, a couple of times, he done the one where it comes in and he flicks it round the side and he runs round the other side and gets it. Perhaps he thinks he could have got it to somebody else, or he wasn't wanting to hold it in and wait for a pass. He just wanted to take the guy on. So perhaps that's another area for progression, is to get more people around. But I think the big man, Šeško, will make a huge difference for that.
Yeah. Also, the ability of the players themselves and the newness of the environment around them. Because, I mean, the bravery of Cunha to take because he'd been fairly quiet for 20 minutes and then he exploded with that chance on the halfway line where he sort of span and then went past 3 or 4 players. Then he went all the way through, then ran out of legs at the end, which is understandable. But it was very close to being one of the great Old Trafford goals, wasn't it? That's how close he was to that, and to make that his instant impact at United. Now, you mentioned then Mbeumo had a couple of chances where the touches were sublime. Maybe there was a little bit of anxiety in some of them, or maybe a misreading of the movement. There's also the point that Dalot was playing and he got himself into 3 or 4 really good areas, and you would have imagined that a player with more composure in the attacking third would have created a better chance there. That's not digging out Dalot. That's the point of saying he's a right back, and in those areas he's not always expected. If you remember in a time gone past, we might have been doing this podcast about how Ten Hag changed the number 10 system and had Dalot making the late runs, and he was maybe 4 or 5 games in a row that he found himself through one-on-one with a goalkeeper, wasn't it? And went to bits. Well, this system, at least on Sunday, seemed to put Dalot in good areas. We were talking about this before, but I mean, maybe that's another point. The fact that Dalot started, you would expect Ahmad to play, but even then, I thought, good bravery from the manager in chasing the game, because in too many games last season, he brought off a defender and put on a defender, and this time around, I expected him to keep Dalot on and bring Mbeumo off because of it being his debut, but no, he went for it, and fair enough. But I mean, that's another point, Mike. I mean, further to what Tony was talking about with the slides and the areas that United were getting in. 22 chances. We'll look at all the stats in a minute. A lot of chances created, but not like really high quality. I mean, the XG something like 1.9 or a little bit under that, which, considering they had 22 chances, tells you that there's not a real high quality there. There are a lot of like half movements and a lot of snatch chances and a lot of good positions taken without shots getting off. So, and also like one of the better shots was Dogu's effort from way out the post as well, which sort of takes the percentages up a little bit. But I mean, the point is about the promise of everything that we're doing. I know Amorim came out and I was surprised to see Club Media quote this saying at least we weren't boring. Well, United weren't. I mean, even under Ten Hag, because we've not been boring. Like, there were exciting moments in there. But I see the point. I see the point that was being made, right? The point was that, we were proactive. We were putting the pressure on. And the errors that we saw, or the things that didn't work, you can put down at this moment in time without getting too concerned too much. Because we saw so much progression in what that system looks like, that we can put that first game down to like the fact that some of those players just aren't used to playing with each other yet, and the more that they play with Cunha and Mbeumo, and the more that they can see how strong they are on the ball, which is a massive difference to what we saw last season. How strong they are at carrying the ball, how eager they are to create opportunities which is they're three qualities that we just didn't have in the forward line last season. They make such a tremendous difference, but when you've got them, it's kind of like the team's like, oh God, we've got them now. What do we do with them? And that's very much what it felt like, didn't it, on Sunday?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, several points. I mean, we can talk about XG, shots on goal, shots on target, possession, but the eye test for me is looking at situations that are created. We created lots of situations where it's positive, it's progressive, and from those situations, chances were created. And that was, the last point you made, where Kunyam and Bremer were able to use their strength, their sheer physicality. Now, that was out of possession, but also when they were on the ball, in possession, to get themselves in those positions and, importantly, out of tight situations. I mean, you talked about the chance that Cunha had in the first half, but there was also that one in the second half where he received the ball and turned his man and went at the goal. He carried the ball 20, 30 yards. Now, last season, Garnacho on the left, Ahmad on the right, may have carried the ball 20, 30 yards, but they would have had the ball to their feet and faced up against a fullback or a wide player, whereas Cunha took the player out and was going towards the centre halves. That's the big difference. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Once the players around him realise, I can pop it into this player to his feet. I can do give a really hard pass in there because he's going to stick or they're going to turn onto it, and it will knit together eventually. It has to. And to Tony's point, once we start flooding that penalty box, and with Šeško having played a few more games, those situations are going to turn into opportunities, which is going to turn to a higher XG and hopefully more goals.
Yeah. Now for apprehension corner. All the key stats here favour United. Everything that is across the board there is in United's favour, really. These are the stats that are on the screen now. Games against Arsenal, Liverpool, or Man City in, I guess, since 2010 by the looks of it. And it's a really positive list of numbers. Possession, 60% possession, highest since October 2015, which is fairly surprising it's that long, but you can sort of see why, because United have been a fairly reactive side for a decade. Even under Ole at the best, they were still reactive and counter-attacking. But this goes to show that they were dominating in the possession. Shots, 22, most since August 2011, which coincidentally enough was against Arsenal. You would hate to be an Arsenal fan on that day. I'm very sorry about that. Shots faced, 9, which averaged 17.9 in last season. So obviously, we know that's very much down on the number of shots that we were allowing under Ten Hag for sure. Outshot opponents by 13, as you can see. 7 shots on target. There was also Dogu's at the post. 3 shots on target faced. XG 1.52. I thought it was higher than that. I thought it was 1.8. But yeah, all right. Averaged 1.0 season. Oh, good, that's grim. In last 3 seasons, and XG against was only 1.31. I'm surprised it's that high as well, because I didn't think Arsenal created that much. Averaged 2 a game over the last 3 seasons, which tells you how defensively flimsy we've been. But Tony, the key thing that, again, the eye test, the one thing that's not really measured in the stats there is the fact that Arsenal scored in the 13th minute. And I took great pleasure in calling them Stoke London branch on my Twitter feed. But that does play into it, right? They scored in the 13th minute, and they scored the way that they normally score, and then they played the way they usually play. They're quite happy to let you have the ball because, first of all, they do have pace to break in Saka and Martinelli, more so through Saka. Definitely not through Gyökeres, who looked like he was running through treacle. But they also have quality in the likes of Odegaard and Rice and Zubimendi now, which in a way it's strange that they don't use that quality a little bit more to dominate games when they can do that. But the wider point here being that once they scored from the corner, I wouldn't say they'd let us have that, because I still think United imposed their own style. I think they would have rather had more ball. I don't think it was a choice, but that's their default way of playing. They fall into this reactive way of playing. They're quite happy to let an opponent have the ball. how much do you credit then the positive stats with a positive development with the system and the way that things are going with Amorim? Are you looking at it more positively, or are you looking at it thinking, well, they did score early and it's more on that?
Obviously, I work as an analyst just now, but I was also a data analyst at another championship club in Scotland for a wee while before my current role, and we used to sit down with the managing director at that club, and he would say the stats are only relevant in the context of the game. And he used to talk about a football manager up here who you would get a data report about that size with every imaginable stat you could think of, and he would be given it, and then you'd go in to sit down with him, and he would put his cup of tea on top of the data report, because the data stats, I don't pay a huge amount of attention to that, just because of what you said. Arsenal scored early, and Arsenal almost could afford to sit back and let's see what United have got. Let's see if they can break us down, because last season, the season before, we couldn't break teams down. We couldn't score goals in those scenarios. So I think they would have been happy enough, having scored that early, to sit back. And if that is what they were doing, because that's kind of what I thought, Arsenal are happy with us. They're going to wait and see if we can break them down. Obviously, all those stats are going to go up, and they're going to look better written down than you would expect them to. Having said that, I think a lot of teams, we spoke about this last week, there'll be a lot of teams in the Premier League now thinking, oh, we're going to have to watch what we're doing against Manchester United this season, because I think there was enough in that game. And bearing in mind, this is a team that have been second consistently in the top three for a number of years, and we can sit and batter them because they've not won anything, and Arteta's in stage 6 of a 2-stage plan and all the rest of that stuff. But ultimately, they are a top operator. This is the team that put Real Madrid at the Champions League last year. And at points, we looked as if we could really hurt them on Sunday. And I think that'll have alarm bells for a lot of teams in the Premier League. And what that creates is, when the big man's up front, because I think we saw it, he pinned the 2 centre-backs. They were further away from the game when he came on the pitch. So I just think, bear in mind that not every team in England has the quality that Arsenal have. We're going to see open spaces, and that's why I'm so optimistic. That's why this week I've been like, oh, well, we're pretty good, because I just think, I don't want to name teams because it come back and bite us in the face, but there are certain teams that I think are going to have a lot of fear coming. And a couple of caps, I need to doff a couple of caps. One to you, Wayne, for the 8-2 reference earlier on. I'll just come out and say it, absolutely, doff your cap to that. But also to the Old Trafford crowd on Sunday, because I think Gyökeres disappeared down a hole, because every single time they let one a ball, there was a huge cheer. And I just felt like Gyökeres, it was like, oh, shrinking into his shirt. I don't want to be here. And the cheer that he got hooked after 60 minutes was pretty loud. So, yeah, I think fear factor, potentially, I don't want to say it's back, but certainly the scarometer will definitely be up.
Yeah, I mean, considering United looked scared to play Old Trafford many times for the last couple of years, or 18 months at least, we've been pumped timidly by Bournemouth 3-0 twice at Old Trafford. I'd be very surprised if that happens this season. But there you go, there's your jinx. That'll come back and bite me, no doubt, at some point. Mike, before we move on to the next part of tactics, I'll let you have a little bit of a ref corner here. First of all, classic refereeing on the Raya time wasting, because that was great that he allowed that amount of time to go on, and then book him after 70 odd minutes to leave just enough time to allow him to waste and get a warning. I mean, some things never change. I do remember when we just signed Onana and he got booked for time wasting. And there was the incident in the other game of the weekend. It escapes me now, but the goalkeeper had the ball for 8 seconds. And, It shows you how long a second is, right? 3 seconds. They're not counting, but when it's obvious and it's 8, it's like, oh yeah, I've got to stop this. And maybe there was an element of that at the weekend, like, oh yeah, he's definitely time wasting this time, when he's one of the chief perpetrators of said crime. But it's not the goalkeeping that we're going to grumble about. It's something that never gets commented about, but you and I have complained about this in the past, and now it's going to hit the mainstream. Well, to the 600 people who are watching it, as mainstream as that gets, who are watching us live, I should say. Throw-ins, Mike. Throw-ins, the scourge of my existence. And I was banging on about this, like, it's at Old Trafford, back when Evra would take throw-ins, and I know you just said there, you think Evra's throw-ins were spawned. There were plenty of times when they weren't. But no matter about Evra, something has happened. Something has happened. It's rife in the game. It's spread through the game like a disease. Players cannot take throw-ins, and some are worse than others. And who was the worst for you on Sunday?
Okay, so a bit of context. I refereed my first game of pre-season on Sunday before the United-Arsenal game. And early on in the game, I blew the whistle, foul throw, give it to the other team. He goes, what did I do? I said, well, your back foot was up. There was clear air. There's clear space. Laws of the game. He even came up to it at the end of the game and said to me, ref, it was a friendly. Did you really have to blow up for the foul throw? And I went, what was the laws of the game? It was a foul throw. I had to give it to the other team. Then I sit down watching United, and in the space of 3 minutes, around the 65th minute mark, Calafiori did that twice. Exactly the same. His back foot came up twice. Clear air between. I'm thinking, what is the ref looking at? What is the assistant looking at? In the great scheme of things, it's not a massive thing, but being a referee and just watching things like thinking, just blow up. Please blow the whistle. Tell them to do it again. But he didn't. And yeah, it is a bugbear of mine, Wayne. Something that, one of the many things that we do share.
Yeah. Don't worry about that, guys, if you're listening. Around the 30-minute mark, every week we'll try and push in a grumpy old man grumbling about something that really means nothing to anyone else. But it does matter. It's if you let the standard slip on the little things, then you'll let them slip on the big things as well, like time-wasting goalkeepers. But yeah, there we go. That's the reason why we lost. Nothing to do with Bayandia. Nothing to do with Fernandez losing the ball. All right, so another thing I want to talk about, because a lot of conversation, a lot of the discourse has been about the midfielder that United don't have, or the goalkeeper they don't currently have, or the goalkeeper they do have. Tony, what was what we lack in the team through a midfielder, through a goalkeeper, through what's commonly accepted as the two players that United should be signing in the remainder of the window, or the two players profiles that everyone has got it in their heads that we need to be doing? I mean, I agree on a goalkeeper and I agree on a midfielder, but they're down the priority line as far as the manager's concerned, because he signed 3 players before then. And he's going to live or die by those choices, obviously. But are the profile of those players and what we like in those players, or the attributes in the potential players we bring in, what we lack in the attributes of the players that are currently at the club, was that the difference between winning and losing on Sunday? And knocking on from that, can we fix those issues with what we currently got in terms of the system?
A lot to unpack in that one. Ultimately, it's hard to argue that when there's only one goal in the game, and the goal is such a clear error by a player, it's hard to argue that that wouldn't have happened if you had a different player in that position. But if you've listened to or watched Joe Hart's analysis of the two goalkeepers, because two very similar moments, and how Bayandia deals with it, and then how David Raya deals with it, getting his arm free, getting across to punch it. Bayandia just goes with the wrong hand. I don't buy that there's a foul in there. I think he should be stronger. So for me, it's hard to argue against that point. Perhaps it would have been different. It may have been different with Onana, but it could be different then. And we're then into the realms of hypotheticals. So, yeah, it probably would have been different. But in terms of the midfielder, it's obvious, football's really obvious, and we've tried to fix one obvious problem. We didn't put the ball in the onion bag last season enough. So the club have went, targeted that, signed a striker, signed 2 number 10s that suit the system. They've tried to fix that. The goalkeeper's the next one for me. That's a clear, obvious area that we need to fix. But a less tangible one is absolutely what's happening in the midfield. Where Baleba's the one that everybody's talking about. You can split hairs about £100+ million for a holding midfielder. Ultimately, there's no successful team at the top end of European football that doesn't have a really, really good holding midfielder, at least in their squad. And I think we've got one who was really good 5 years ago, 10 years ago, was the best in the world. But time waits for no man, and I don't think Casemiro is the answer in there. I would say there is potential to mould Kobbie Mainoo into the player that we need him to be. But for me, when the evidence is there that Amorim doesn't fancy Kobbie Mainoo,
Yeah,
I just don't think he does. Whether I agree with him on that or not is by the by. He's the guy that picks the team. I would absolutely say Kobbie Mainoo has the potential to fulfil that role and be more disciplined, but I don't think he's going to get the chance to under this manager, because I think he would already have had more of a chance. So to answer your second question, I don't think the players at the club, and it goes back to the Ugarte thing, can fulfil the needs of the system as it is. Whether the goalkeeper or the midfielder is the more important thing to sort out right now, I would probably say sort the goalkeeper out first.
Yeah.
Just because the 2 boxes are where games are won and lost. And the midfielder, perhaps, we might need to wait another year if it's Baleba and they're going to hang their hat on him. We might need to wait another year for him. Yeah. But I think there are other options out there. I watched the Palace highlights, Adam Wharton. Really like him. Really do like him. I don't think he'll come in at the same value or market value, or would have to part with the same level of cash, but it looks like Palace are getting cherry picked right now, so whether they'd want to sell him or not, probably not. So I think, and you can shoot me down for saying this, I think we might end this window with what we've got right now.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, but I mean that's for me, Mike, is where I'm coming in at thinking, can we fix those errors with what we got? Do we look at last season and say that was a failed opportunity to mould Kobbie into the kind of player that, you know, there's been a lot of talk over the summer about how he's got the physicality going, and you know he's been working on his endurance and stamina, and you would have thought, all right, well, that's possibly to mould him into what Amorim is looking for. But then you've got like a player with so much immense potential and talent. All right, maybe better as a 10, but when you've got an obvious hole there, and he's got a skill set that fits into many of those things, then yeah, like I said earlier, it's better working on what he's missing, because you can't give Ugarte what he's missing. I mean, I'm not being too critical there. What I'm saying, he's got his skills, he's got his strengths, and you can tell, anyone who's a casual observer of football can tell he doesn't have the ball carrying abilities. He can't kick a football in the same way that at a very, very basic level, in comparison to the likes of Casemiro and Kobbie and Fernandes. That's just a matter of fact. You can see that. I don't even think he would argue the point with that. So, I mean, the same question in a different way to you, Mike. First of all, do you think it was a missed opportunity with Kobbie to develop him over the last sort of 8 months? Maybe that wasn't his priority. Maybe that's an explanation for that. Or do you think that, you know, like Tony was saying, time waits for no man? Can we fix the system? Can we fix the errors in the problems that we've got in the system with what we've got? Or time won't wait for no man? Will that catch Amorim out eventually?
I mean, it's very, very easy for us to sit here and say, right, we need to fix this and this because we've got a game coming up and we see what happened last week and we want to fix it for next week. But let's look at it a different way. Against Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, probably Chelsea, in terms of the teams right at the top of the league, we're not at that level yet. It's the rest of the division which we're going to have to do really well against. Win those games, lose as few. If we can do that, you get in that mix for that top 4, top 5. It's not going to be our games against Arsenal, Liverpool, and City. Therefore, have we got enough midfielders for us to go through a season? Obviously, there are going to be injuries and so on. Can that afford Amorim the opportunity to mould Mainu? I would say yes, and I would say that's what we should do if we're going to wait for Belieber next season, which brings me to that's why we have to get a goalkeeper, because you could score the goals, and in these tight games, like on Sunday, we're binding not to make that error. It would have been 0-0. Who knows what could have happened? We could have nicked it. It could have been a draw. And it's these margins. And it's, when a goalkeeper makes a mistake, it's usually a goal. When a midfielder makes a mistake, it may create a situation or a chance for the opposition. Those are the margins. And for me, it's got to be a goalkeeper. Your last question about the system, I think that there is a role for Mainu to play this year. I think we will see him play more. I do believe that, because Amorim can't. It couldn't have been lost on him how poor Ugarte was. Poor in the basics, as you said, just the passing 5 yards, 10 yards. That was really bad. And that's Kobbie's game. He gets it and gives it, but he can also manipulate the ball. It's very good feet. Where else do you want that? You want that in the central midfield. And against the teams other than the 4 I mentioned, surely you can thrive in a system like that, especially when you've got Cunha on one side and Buemo on the other. You've got Šeško you can play to feet. You've got Fernandes next to you. How can you not play Mainu? So for me, I'd leave the midfield with what we got if it's only one, and it has to be a goalkeeper.
Yeah. I think when we next play a big game, probably City in a few weeks, we'll return to that revolving 5 scenario. We were talking about it in last week's pod, and we started like that on Sunday, because we played Mount as a false striker, really, and it's a missed opportunity to really talk about that. But that's another area where Kobbie can play, as long as you're moving around in there and you're not asking him to play as a number 9 or even as a false 9. If he's moving around and other players are filling gaps, then he can thrive just as others can thrive as well. But I think the points that you're both making there about the fact that, we're not playing those teams every week. And secondly, that, what we've already signed in terms of the forward play, those compensatory things can also cover all manner of papered cracks at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that they didn't on Sunday, but these are the teething errors of the system or teething problems with it. So over, let's say that you get another 30 to 50 goals added through those strikers. Hopefully that's what the case will be with the caliber of player that we brought in. Those 30 to 50 goals can mask the goalkeeping errors. They can mask the issues that we've got in midfield in those bigger games. Let's pull no punches with that. The midfield, again, isn't where we lost that game on Sunday. And if you look at most of the big games last season, Amorim got those results dead on with the midfield that we've got. And the performances were pretty good in those games as well. So as much as I'm concerned, I think everyone is concerned, it's also worth remembering the evidence of what we've got there and the fact that we did do well in those games last season, mostly. And we didn't lose the game based on that at the weekend. So there's a lot to be positive about, even though we did lose. But yeah, so Tony's point ringing in my head there, time waits for no man. Waits for not us either. 45 minutes. Didn't talk about Fulham at the weekend. We're not going to preview it. We'll review it afterwards, but we've banged on enough there. I think there's enough there to tell you where we think about the system at the moment anyway. So, and if we're going to be fair, Fulham haven't made a lot of changes from last season at all. They haven't really brought in anyone. They haven't sold anyone. So it's going to be very much what you expect from them last season. So we'll see. Tight games always with them. Tight game at Old Trafford, tight game down there. We won both of them last season, which is a surprise, considering how good Fulham have been against us in terms of the performances. Old Trafford in particular have been good, but I think it's the last 2,000 games down at Fulham, we've lost it one in the last minute, haven't we, or something like that? I don't know. We certainly like last 3 or 4 we've won late on. So it was Martinez last season, Fernandes the season before, Garnacho the season before that. Might have been Garnacho. And then we've obviously got a bit of Rooney, a bit of Ronaldo in there as well in the past.
Yeah.
Let's hope for a more comfortable win on Sunday, or a win at all. I'll take a last minute win. Why not? As long as we've got something more to talk about in terms of the system it'll be Tuesday night next week because Mike has scored himself a ticket to Grimsby. And, Tony did say, we've got a patchy record against them. We haven't played them since the successful 1948 season. So I had a City fan had a dig at me about this because, we've drawn Grimsby in the Cup. And I'm like, no, hang on a minute, mate. You were playing them back-to-back in the 90s. Good grief. So many games that City and Grimsby were playing in the 90s. I know it's not that long ago. It's distant from the memory. But none of us, even we 3 old men in this podcast, were not old enough to see us last time we played against Grimsby. Anyway, we'll be back next week to talk about the Fulham game and to preview Grimsby. And I'll join in the jealousy at Mike's ability to find that winning ticket to go to, is it still Blundell Park?
It is, yeah.
Blundell Park. Great stuff. All right, we'll be back next week, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And have a good week.